Good morning.
Good morning. Today is May 11th, 2025,
I knew that.
and it's Mother's Day. So, our talk today is Mother's Day and healthy boundaries. And so, at first, you might wonder what that has to do with anything. But if you think about it, it won't, because there's probably no closer relationship than mother and child, no matter how old the child is. And it does require, healthy boundaries, or it can become resentment. So, but we're going to start with Mother's Day.
Yeah, I asked you this earlier. I said, when did Mother's Day start? And I was being funny, thinking when was the first woman who became a mother. But what I didn't realize is that Mother's Day actually has a date.
As a beginning.
Yeah, it has a beginning.
And it surprised us what it was because it was started in 1908. The first U.S. Mother's Day
There were
was
no
19.
mothers before that.
And surprisingly, it wasn't about honoring mothers. It was actually a call to action by a mother who was an activist. And so it was it was started by Anne Reeves Jarvis, or no, it was in honor of Anne Reeves Jarvis by her daughter Anna Jarvis. Sorry, excuse me. And it was a Civil War era. She was a Civil War era activist who organized Mother's Day work clubs, and they were to improve the sanitary conditions and lower infant mortality. So, most infants were born at home at that time.
And back then they were dirty.
Well, I know my
Yeah,
father had, there were six children altogether, and they were all born at home.
yeah, yeah.
So evidently they needed more sanitary
Well, I think
conditions.
too that in that period of time we hadn't really discovered bacteria to the extent that we
Yeah,
have now. And so we didn't realize how many things we were doing that were unsanitary. And of course, unsanitary conditions would really add to the mortality.
of the infant.
Sure, sure.
So, um, and then after the war, she hosted Mother's Friendship Days, and that was to promote reconciliation between the Union and Confederate soldiers. So Mother's Day, in its original intention, was a moral call to action, not just a gesture of appreciation of mothers, which is what it's become now. But I kind of liked it because it reminds me that as mothers and as women, our voices need to be heard. And many of us are not raised that way. We're raised to not disagree with the male authority figures in our lives, fathers, grandfathers, husbands. And so it takes an extra amount of energy and oomph and time to actually participate in activism. But women are usually more concerned with things like war and the devastation it causes than men.
Well, and I think because
Excuse me.
women are mothers, they're the creators, they're the peacemakers. They don't create something like a child in order for it to be eliminated or killed.
Precisely.
And
That's
so,
exactly what you think of when you
yeah, and so
have
I
a
think
baby.
that what I really was struck with is mothers who are activists for peace, that they're peacemakers, and but that's always been true. And I think too, if you've ever had a mother, some of us did. Uh, Whenever there was an argument or a difficult time, typically they would try to make peace. Fathers often would say things like, "Don't make me come over there." Moms would come over there to see what was going on and what they could do. And I mean, that mentality has changed now. Men are not like that anymore, uh, except on occasion. But that's just a huge piece.
It is huge. And I remember when I had my first son, I said, I will not let him become cannon fodder. I will not let him go to war and be decimated
Sure.
and all of that. And then it came time for him to go to college, and he got an Air Force scholarship to Duke University. And of course, that means you're going to owe the Air Force some time afterwards. And I realized, oh my God, this is not my decision. I don't have the power to keep him from going to war if that's what he chooses to do, and that's what's happening in the world.
But what's interesting about that is you raised him with the consciousness of service. And he didn't just serve the military, he served the country, he served organizations,
He did, that's
he
true.
served he served in many ways. So, part of what I think
And he
motherhood,
never did go to war.
no, but I think part of what motherhood is also helping humanity find its way to providing service.
Ah, yes, and being of service ourselves. Yeah, I was very fortunate that the wars that came did not require my sons to go to war. And so that I feel very fortunate in that. And it's still happening. The new Pope, um,
I like that.
Pope Leo the 14th, refers to, he says we're still having a world war in many parts
All over the world.
all over the world. And so it's not just one war, it's lots of wars right now. And so it can make you feel like it's inevitable. And it should not be. It should not be. But anyway, back to Mother's Day. And I think that there is no role in life that is more self-sacrificing out of love and hard and long than being a mother. And it's also very rewarding. So that's why we do it. But I think it's appropriate that mothers are acknowledged, especially then when they get to be older, like me, and they're not doing much in the mothering role. It's nice to be honored for the mothering that you have done.
It's interesting how many women who are mothers are also writing memoirs. And writing the memoir is another way of sharing motherhood for the next generation.
It
And
is.
but I was also thinking for all the men out there that are watching us, and we have so many that are watching us every week. I guess my question would be, how are you a peacemaker for yourself? How are you making peace with yourself and who you are and your life? Because I think we can borrow from the feminine, which is to create a place for life. Uh, but I wonder too, men and women, are we creating a place for life for us?
Mhm.
And I think very often, and the problem we can have is we are so busy that busyness becomes what we do. And we're not creating a nurturing place for ourselves. We're just trying to get everything done. We're trying to make this life work as though it's really all about the work rather than about how we are together.
This is true. This is true, especially for men, but for many women as well.
Yeah.
Um, so I'd like to get into this healthy boundaries idea and why we're talking about it on Mother's Day. As I said, there's no closer relationship than a mother and child, no matter how old the child is. And yet the child needs to grow up and leave home.
Mhm.
And they cannot do that unless they can become independent and disagree with mom in some areas. And if mom wants this and they want that, to say, I don't want this, mom, I want that. That's a boundary. That's saying, I want something different than you want from me. And we need to be able to do that. If we don't have healthy boundaries, we, the children, become resentful,
Mhm.
and we resent mom for trying to control us or give to mom more than we have to give. And so it's always an issue of healthy boundaries with parents and children. And so whether we're talking about your children or your parents, we need healthy boundaries where each individual's,
It's
even though we're related.
it's a hard one to do, but and you think about when you get on the airplane and they tell you if we have the air mask come down, put it on yourself first before you put it on your child. And the reason for that is if you put it on your child first, you may not actually be able to complete that because you may run out of oxygen. And do you have any other children? Are you a mother to more than one person? And I think the tendency, particularly in my experience, women are willing to give themselves up way too easily when they need to think about how valuable and important they are to the world and to take care of themselves. And so part of healthy boundaries is really saying, I'm worth taking care of. I'm worth having my needs met.
If I'm even worth having an opinion.
I don't know about that, but yeah.
I was telling Bob earlier that I remember an incident when I was about 20 years
Oh,
old
yeah.
at my grandfather's house with all our relatives and my father sitting beside me. And he voiced a political opinion. And I said, I disagree with that, Grandpa. And my father grabbed my leg and whispered, don't you dare disagree with your grandfather. And I thought, wow. I'm not, I was used to in school being able to have a different opinion than others, but I hadn't tried it with the grandfather, I guess.
Mhm.
And I knew I couldn't do it with the father. So women in particular are often trained, not to have an opinion that they voice. So it takes a little more effort for us to stand up and stand out. Although that is certainly not true for our younger generation. I'm so proud of our daughters and nieces and people, and see how strong and independent and opinionated they are. So I think that's a healthy thing. That's a good boundary. But I wanted to go back to what we were talking about with women and their power to stop wars and whatnot. Bob reminded me of a story that we saw on television some years ago. There was a true story that happened in the country of Liberia. Liberia is a country in Africa that was started, and I don't know exactly how it came about, but I know the idea was started by a Presbyterian minister. We looked that up, right? In like 1847, they founded Liberia. I don't know how, but Liberia stands for liberation. And this minister, American minister, idea was let's have all of the free native Africans who want to go back to Africa, let them go, because he felt they would have more freedom there than they would ever have, or that they would have in those days in the United States. And it was voluntary, of course, but and he couldn't mess with anybody else's property who was a slave. But that's how Liberia started. I think it's kind of lost that identity now.
Mhm.
They have their African language and whatnot. But we saw a true story where they were at war. This seems to happen all the time. Different tribes, different groups, they were at war, and it just wasn't seeming to stop or be settled
They were at war from within.
within.
Right.
Yes. And so one grandmother went to the capital where they were having a conference to try to end the conflict. And what she saw was that it was going to end
They
in
were deadlocked.
division and battle. They
They were
were deadlocked.
deadlocked. Yeah.
And so what she did is she took off all her clothes outside. And in Africa, it is a terrible thing to look at a naked grandma. She was a grandma. They call them all mama. But she took her clothes off. They say, oh no, mama, no, no. And she said she was not putting her clothes on until they made some peace. I don't know what happened with that, but she ended up going back home. And what she did is she told all the women, the only way we're going to stop this if we say no more sex for the husbands, no more sex for the men until this war stops. And guess what? It worked.
Mhm.
It worked.
Yeah. And so the video we saw
Woman power.
was all of the women lined up all the way to the Capitol building and wearing white. And they were not participating with their husbands in any kind of intimacy, and they were standing for the peace that they wanted, which is embarrassment to the men. And so eventually it stopped.
That time. But so
Right.
what a powerful story though
But
for
it's also what I like is that the first thing that women often think about when they want to have power over something is not getting a gun. You know,
yeah.
there's lots of ways to exercise power that don't include killing somebody, but we seem to revert very quickly to the most primitive strategy for being in control, rather than one that includes kindness and a future. So again, though, I want to bring it back to the men and to the women here today and ask that question: how are you making peace with yourself? How are you making peace with the conflicts that you struggle with within? Are you at war internally? And if you're at war internally, does that take a lot of energy? And if that takes a lot of energy, is there a way that you can give any of that up, or at least become aware of it and make some decisions about how you can be more at peace with yourself? I know for me, one of the ways that I'm able to find peace is through meditation. And a meditation certainly, meditation is a step that allows me to separate myself from what I need, what I want, and the way I think things are, to what is possible and how is the world possible for me in ways I hadn't thought about. And so it opens the door to other possibilities than the ones that I can think of. The other thing I think we can do too to find peace within is gratitude. And that is spend some time being recognizing, acknowledging the things that we're grateful for. I think rather than getting more things, maybe we need to pay more attention to being grateful for the things we have and to honor those things. And that includes people, but honoring the
And
sofa.
mothers.
Yeah, yeah, honoring the sofa you sit on because it's comfortable to sit on, or getting rid of it if it isn't. But but I think we lose track of that. And again, for me, what I notice is that the busyness of life becomes what I do rather than anything else. It's what's next on our list. And I'm going back to that because I think sometimes the list takes precedent over kindness, over peacefulness, over finding a way to find joy in your life. And so those are all strategies, and they're also openings for more aliveness. It's going to be hard to be a loving, kind parent if you're just too busy for it. And I think one of the things that's happening now is, and I hear this from our kids, not our kids, but this generation, is that our parents have really deserted us in pursuit of the things that they need, want, and got to have.
Or
And
have to pay for, yeah.
right, and we're on our own, but we do have our iPad, so we're good. I think what one of the things that's happening is we've given our children something that silences them, and because they're silent, we think that they're not objecting or they're not unhappy. And we're creating a lot more unhappiness than we realize because there's nothing that makes us less happy than being lonely. And what I hear from our children is that they're a lot more lonely than they were a generation ago.
Because all that interaction with the monitors doesn't solve the need for togetherness
Yeah,
with other
yeah.
kids.
Or the skills that it takes that you develop when you are with somebody. One of the most amazing things I think that I see when I look at mothers is the levels of skills that they have for all occasions, how they can intervene in so many different areas and to do it so subtly. Those are skill sets. If we don't teach our children that by socializing them, then they're very awkward in this thing called our world. They don't know how to manage it, and of course they can just give their kids iPads too. But
Well, and an even bigger problem is I'm just becoming aware of is that we're having a real problem repopulating ourselves
yeah,
because so many women went to work and don't have time or want to have babies.
well, and they have to work. And so
In this economy, they have to work,
so
yes.
Judith and I we're gonna have some more kids. I know it seems late, but we can do it.
Somebody's got to do it.
That's right. Yeah, we're gonna go for two a year. Hopefully twins each time. And we should be dead in 6 months.
Oh, well, yeah, that's this, and that's a worldwide problem.
But
right
it's an
now.
interesting message that they talk about it in terms of fertility, but really what we're talking about is I'm too busy and I have to be too busy to actually procreate.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
When was the
yeah.
last time that happened? That the creation process
Never that we know of.
right, has been interrupted by just trying to survive. And I think this is a really, really important thing for us to say, what am I doing that I call survival? What am I doing to thrive rather than to survive? How does my soul and my heart and my being thrive? And I think, there's a lot of stuff that we do that's survival without really having put a big S on it. And we take a look at that this week and ask yourself, is this something that I need to do, want to do, got to do? Is this part of my survival? And it's so important because somebody else thinks it's important, or how important is it for me?
Good point. Good point. So I think it's time now
Yeah.
to do a share screen. screen share.
over here.
And so we'd like to take this time to invite you to support this ministry. If anything is a benefit to you, we appreciate your financial support because we know that as you give, you do receive. It's a law of circulation. And so this is our website, cslpalmbeaches.org. And if you go there, there's a button that says ways to donate. And so that will show you how you can support us. And we thank you so much for your generosity.
Yeah, we've had some really wonderful generosity in this last week, and we really appreciate it. It just makes such a difference because we end up also, like everyone else, being busy with trying to get everything to work economically. And if we're not careful, the economics of it can run us rather than the spiritual intention that we have for having a service and providing services that really do work.
So let's say this affirmation: my investment
Investment today
today is made
made
with the
the
full
full realization
realization that
that
God
God
is
is
the
the
source
source
of
of
my
my
supply
supply
and
and
returns
returns
it
it
to
to
me
me
enriched
enriched
and
and multiplied.
multiplied. So it is.
Okay, so let's stop the share, end the recording, stop recording.